Hi, I'm Valentina Borghesani, and I'm happy to answer to your questions about neuroscience and language. So how does neuroscience help the study of language? So neuroscience, which is the study of the brain in terms of function, structure, and disease, can help us understand how the brain does language. What happens when we produce and understand linguistic structures? The field of neuroscience is vast and multiple different methods are used, from neuroimaging to neuropsychology to computational models. What is neuroimaging? Neuroimaging is the term we use to indicate a number of different techniques that help us study the structure and the function of the brain. So you might have heard of functional magnetic resonance imaging, or in short, fMRI, or positron emission tomography, PET in short. And they are basically ways of taking a picture of your brain that help us understand which areas are activated when you're doing a certain task, for example, speaking. So what happens in the brain when we speak? Even something apparently as simple as speaking requires many different areas of your brain to work all together. So we call the ensemble of these areas the language network. And some areas are needed to plan the words you are meaning to say, others to instruct your mouth on the movement it needs to make. Do we use the same brain areas when we speak and when we listen? So the core of the language network, this left lateralized frontotemporal set of brain regions that are associated with language processing, is involved in any linguistic task. So receptive, listening and reading, but also productive, speaking and writing. However, some brain regions are specifically important for one aspect or the other, so they create a different degree of specialization within the whole network. How does word association work? So our representation of word meanings are all intertwined. Mentioning one word activates the concepts that refer to that word. So you say dog, and I think of a furry, four-legged animal, but also to all the concepts that I've learned to associate with dogs. So for instance, leash or cat. So some associations between words are called thematic. So I use a leash with a dog. Others are called taxonomic. Both cats and dogs are mammals, house pets. Either way, from one word, one concept, we can always easily jump to many others. Why sometimes we have to look for words, like we can't immediately find them? So to retrieve a word, once we know the concept we want to refer to, we need to find the appropriate lexical label, the actual combination of letters, and this is called lexical access. Many factors can make lexical access easier or harder. Some depend on the words themselves. For instance, words that we don't often use are harder to retrieve. Others depends on the situation. So if we're talking of French celebrities, I might find it hard to find the name of German ones just because there's too much interference. In fact, one of the things some of us within the NCCR are working on is to understand if the word associations that we mentioned before, the network of a given concept, is weaker for those words that sometimes we fail to retrieve. What happens when we know two different words in two different languages that have the same meaning? So is there a common representation for dog in English and chien in French? With the evidence that we have to date, indeed, we believe that once we master different languages, they get represented in the same brain areas. However, there is still a lot we don't know on how different neurorepresentation of word meaning are influenced by the language we speak. So for instance, in one language, dog might be more associated with bone than to leash, and in another language, it might be the opposite. So again, this is one of the projects we're working on within the NCCR Evolving Language. So again, stay tuned for more.